Of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, how your car can last a lifetime or maybe just a 500,000 miles. Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Tony Joe's with me as he is every Friday to take your Car Corner questions. The number to call is 1-877-913-5357. You can also send an email into the website at prudentmoney.com if you got a question for me. We'll be happy to answer that. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Tony Joe, how's it going today?
Good. How are you doing, Bob?
Well, if I would stop stumbling over my words, I think I would do pretty good. Maybe it's Friday.
Yeah, well, it's the end of the
Something like
week,
that.
end of a long week.
So when you talk about cars lasting for a long time, you've talked about how things have changed. I mean, cars are lasting 2, 3, 4, 500,000 miles, where that really wasn't the case in the past. We have a listener. Tom is going to join us here. Tom, are you there? Let's see. Maybe Chris is connecting Tom with us.
Tell us about Tom.
Well, Tom has sent me an email and said, "Hey, listen, if you ever want to talk about a car lasting a long time," he goes, "I've got a vehicle that's about to surpass 500,000 miles, which is absolutely amazing." And I've always thought if we ever had the opportunity to interview somebody who was in a situation like that, definitely wanted to do that. I guess I would assume here. Let me see if there's any messages.
Yeah, that's interesting. 500,000 miles. That's quite a long time.
Oh, okay. Chris says he lost him.
Do you know what year the car is? I'm just curious.
I think it was 2005.
Good. Good for him. That is incredible.
Okay, so Tom is back. Tom, you there?
Yes, I'm back. Back on. I don't know how long the signal will hold together.
How are you doing today, Tom? I appreciate you coming on the program.
Sure thing. Hi, Bob. Hi, Tony Joe.
Hey, Bob. Tom.
So tell me this: what type of a car do you have that you've put so many miles on?
It's a 2005 Toyota Matrix.
And Tom, we've met. We know each other. Now that I hear your voice, I know who you are exactly. Are you still?
Yes, you were a guardian angel for this car, Tony Joe.
I'm sorry?
You were a guardian angel for this car.
Yeah, I remember the Matrix. Now, I didn't realize this was you. Are you still, what do you attribute all these miles to? Are you doing Uber with it? Or how are you acquired?
Uber? Yes, Uber and Amazon Flex.
I'm not familiar with that. What is that, like an Uber?
Well,
that's where people individuals drive their own personal vehicle to do odd and end type of deliveries, final mile deliveries after the big trucks leave the station.
I see. And Tom, can I ask you, is this, from what I remember, this is all pretty much city driving?
Well, it is, but I really didn't ever hesitate to take it on the road, so I would probably, in addition to maybe 40,000 miles a year of city, then there was probably 10,000 miles a year in long road trips, too. So, yeah, it was very hard miles, always starting and stopping, because I turn the engine off when I go deliver to a house, and then I restart it.
Certainly. Sure.
Every one.
Wow, that's an incredible feat. 500,000. What are you at now? Is it close to 500,000?
it's probably a couple thousand miles short of 500,000, according to my calculation, because the odometer actually, on that year model, it has a 300,000 mile limit on it, and so I had to send it off to get it set back to zero, zeroed out, so I could keep track of the miles.
Wow, that's...
And it was probably 8 months before I did that, so I put maybe 30,000 miles on it before I sent it in.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your long-term game plan with this car? Are you going to keep it and see how many miles you can put on it, or what's your thoughts?
Well, with the car industry, and you guys have talked about this, how cars are overvalued right now and kind of left over from the supply chain, from COVID and stuff. It's not really a good time to buy a replacement car, but it sure has been a good time to drive a car that didn't ever fail. It just kept going and going and going.
Agreed. And tell me, over the long term, I remember working on this car at different times, but over the long term, can you try to remember? First of all, let me ask you, is it the original engine?
Yes.
Okay. And the transmission?
Original transmission, and I put a clutch in it a year ago, and this is the first clutch that I've ever had to put in any of my cars.
So, in almost 500,000 miles, one clutch.
I believe that the previous owner put one in, and I bought it at 210,000 miles on it.
Okay, well, let's say two clutches. Now, Bob.
Yes.
And Tom, listen, the interesting thing about that makes me laugh or giggle is that, if you drive the car appropriately and you have a stick shift, a standard transmission, and it has a clutch, look at how long he's gone, and maybe two clutches. That's one clutch every 250,000 miles. Now, the reason it makes me giggle is because I've known young kids that go to high school and they get their first car and their dad gets them a stick shift car. And 20,000 miles later, it needs a clutch.
Yeah.
So there's a lot
sensitive.
to knowing the proper way to drive a manual transmission as opposed to an automatic. And that's something that I always emphasize with young people is you need to learn how to drive one because you never know when you're going to be forced into a situation, maybe an emergency or something that you need to learn. You need to know how to get in that car and take someone to the hospital or something, So it's just 250,000 miles makes me laugh because I know kids that can't get 20,000 out of one.
So, Tom, tell me this. Is there any part of that vehicle that you have not replaced that surprises you that you've not replaced it?
Well, when probably in the last couple of years, we were kind of scratching our heads and deciding, well, should we really take it to California or to Colorado? And I said, this is probably the original water pump on this thing, and how because it's got a timing chain, and how many miles would you get out of something that is a single point failure, and if it goes, you're kind of dead in the water. But we just kept going, and actually I use it for pulling a very heavy trailer for work for some of my real estate work. An extremely heavy trailer, and I wouldn't do that with an automatic, but I don't really hesitate with a manual, and I know how to drive it right. Actually, now I'm pretty hard on the clutch because the engine's getting weaker, and I've got to flip the clutch just to get it. Like up a steep hill if I have a lot of people in the car or something.
Sure.
So I'm a little harder, and I know it, but I may only have to get maybe another 100,000 miles out of the clutch before it may really bite the dust.
Yeah. Well, listen, it brings up a point that I want to reiterate to people. You mentioned something interesting, and that is it's the original water pump because it has a timing chain, and you've never replaced it. Bob, we talk about this all the time.
Sure.
How long does a timing belt last? Well, it depends. You've got to change it every so many thousand miles according to its scheduled interval. However, a chain will go the life of the engine, provided you get clean oil on it. So Tom is good about changing his oil and filter. And that's why the chain doesn't need to be replaced at 500,000 miles. It's just something I want to point out because we talk about that a lot. Maintenance.
Yeah. So Tom, how often do you change your oil?
You know, I didn't know. There were several schools of thought on doing that, and I used to always change it religiously, 5,000 miles, and sometimes I would go 2 changes with an oil filter. I'd go 10,000 on the filter, and then 5,000 every time the light came on to change it on previous cars. But this one, I always put full synthetic in. And I don't know how many miles they say it's good for, but I just figured that because it's synthetic, I was going to double up and do 10,000 miles, and that's probably the way I did it until about 50,000 miles ago, and then I was seeing some material online, and they were getting oil ring and ring problems on the piston because it was the oil was gumming up and it was causing deposits and the rings were freezing in the piston. And I thought, oh no, I really messed up. I should have been doing it every 5,000 miles. And just like Tony Joe recommends, that's really the way to do it because it's so cheap compared to major engine work that you really want to do it. 5,000 miles max, just so that you're protecting the engine from getting dirty and creating problems of its own.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice, Tom, to give everybody. That's good. Let me ask you about something else. Now, the front end, just try to focus on the front end for a minute. I'm just thinking about high mileage. Have you ever had to replace ball joints and things like that yet?
I had to do the control arms, and just recently I did the struts, and with the control arms came the ball joint.
Right.
And so I did that. That was probably at maybe 350,000.
Okay, because city driving is hard on ball joints and so forth, but it depends on the habit of the driver, as we talk about. It's how you drive the vehicle. If you hit every pothole in sight, you're going to end up replacing ball joints and struts and things. But if you're a little bit more like us, I don't mean older, I just mean a little more, mature about driving, and you don't necessarily go jackrabbit starts and stops and hitting potholes all the time. I mean, that's just proof that you can spend less money and save yourself a bunch of money just by the way you drive or your driving habits. And that's proof right there, Bob, that Tom is doing that. And
Sure.
It's 350,000. Ball joints get changed on some pickup trucks that are used for work vehicles. That are always in construction sites and hitting bumps all the time and being loaded. I mean, I've had to replace ball joints on vehicles with 100,000.
So, Tom, tell me this, because the battery is always the part of the car that I get a little bit anxious about once it's put some years on it, and I'll probably be more in line to go replace it, maybe even before it's done. So how many batteries have you gone through on that car?
I believe I only went through 2. I can't remember what year I got it. Probably around maybe 2015. And so 8 years, you have a couple of batteries. And the battery that I have in it now probably is about 2.5 years old. But one of the things, because it's a manual transmission, there's been a lot of times that I've been out in the field working, and I had to bump start it for one reason or another. It wasn't always the battery, but having the luxury of a manual transmission gave me the the ability to get a little bit more risky and do stuff when if I'd been in an automatic transmission, I'd have gotten stranded lots of times.
Right. That is pretty cool when that opportunity comes up, isn't it? Bob is sitting here with a blank look on his face. He doesn't know what bump starting a stick shift car is. So, you want to tell him, or you want me to?
You can tell him, but tell him that usually it was because the starter was going. I put at least five starters on this, and they were all lifetime starters from AutoZone. So that's like a 20-minute job to change the starter on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy. Well,
you tell him what bump starting is.
Here's what Tom is referring to, Bob, and that is when you're out in the world and you can't start the car for whatever reason. Let's say the battery's not good, or the starter's bad, or ignition switch problems. There's a never-ending list of things that could go wrong, but it won't start for whatever reason. Well, what you can do with a manual transmission is find a small incline, or get a couple of guys to help you, but you put the ignition switch to the on position, and you will push the clutch in and put it in like second gear. And once you get rolling, just enough. It doesn't take much because that Matrix is a 4-cylinder engine, so it's not going to have a lot of compression when it comes time. But once you get rolling, Bob, and you don't have to go very fast, you can pop the clutch. It will engage the transmission, turn the engine over as if the starter was turning the engine over, and it starts up. And you're ready to go. And then you can fix whatever you got to fix when you get home. But you can start it that way. That's one of the advantages of a stick shift over automatic. You'd be sitting there just dead in the water. You wouldn't be able to get it started.
So Tom, answer this question for me. So you do a tune-up every so often. How many complete tune-ups have you had to do to that car?
You know, with a modern car, the tune-up really isn't. I don't know that they even. I guess they could still call it that, but that's really just pretty much changing out the spark plugs. Because there's no ignition parts to change points in ignition coil or condenser anymore to change on those. So I probably put only 2 sets of plugs in, and one of those was at Tony Joe's recommendation when we were having some misfire problems. But those platinum plugs last a pretty long time these days. It's not like the old ones where if you got 100,000 miles out of your car, you were lucky, and so you do a tune-up every other year and maybe get 10,000 miles a year, so 20,000 miles out of your plug. They're not like that anymore.
Right. Speaking of mileage, it just reminded me of a question. Have you ever kept track over the years of the fuel mileage? Like, how much were you getting when you got it at 200,000 as opposed to how much you're getting now? Have you ever kept track of that?
I sure have. I do it because that's a really good barometer of how well it's,
right,
how healthy it is.
Yes.
And it's always been like the 32, 33. Sometimes on a trip it would go as high as almost 35. But just recently, I got a 27 reading. At the same time, I noticed that it was really, really sluggish, and I have a nagging light misfire that I after I change the coils, and I haven't found it. I suspect there's an injector that's getting lazy or something,
mm-hmm.
and it's been weaker, and then the fuel mileage dropped down. And I did something that I don't know if mechanic shops do these on their own, but this is something that's spoken of on the internet, and that's to do a piston ring soak. And I thought that I did have a problem with my rings that got stuck in the pistons with the oil sludge, and I put some of the Berryman's B12 in the combustion chambers and let it soak down into the rings and soften them up. And And that did fix it. I got my power back, and I got my fuel economy back up to 32, 33 again.
Okay, well, that's good. That's a good sign of taking advantage of something that you learned on the internet. That's good.
So tell me this, Tom. What's the goal for the car? How many miles do you ultimately want to put on it? At what point do you go, I think I'm gonna? It's been a good ride. I think I'm gonna trade it in.
You know, I've gotten kind of attached to this old gal, and I'm
Love that.
I'm gonna have a tear in my eye when I get rid of her. I think we call her Trixie affectionately, and she has never let us down. When she did break down, it always seemed like the guardian angel was watching over us. I broke an axle one time in a gas station in Denver, and I was right by a bunch of auto parts stores, and I was very close to the friend of mine that I was going to go visit who had all the tools, and we just changed the part there. We had to wait for a special part.
That's awesome.
It's a manual transmission. But I think that you know, it kind of depends on the industry, the used car industry, the market, because I don't know how much I can get for a 500,000 mile car to trade it out to sell it used, even if it's running well. And if I'm overpaying for my next one, I'm not sure I'm going to be if it's going to be a good deal to do that. And since I drive now, I typically just drive it locally. If I do have a problem with it, I have like a towing plan with my insurance, and so they can get it locally back to my garage or back to a mechanic to work on it. So I think as long as it doesn't start really burning a lot of oil or start giving me more serious engine problems, I'm just going to keep letting her go.
Well, Tom, let me suggest one thing real quick, and then I'll let you go. You might call Toyota when the time comes to part with that. Just tell them what's going on with it and see if they have any interest in it. Okay? And with that,
I have thought about that too. Yes. I think that's a good idea.
And Tom, last few words. I don't think I'd get rid of Trixie. I think I would keep
Trixie. Don't Trixie. You got it wrong.
You see, I was going to ask the question: have you named the car? Because I would have. And see, I just think that you need to keep her for the long haul. That's just my advice.
Can he keep it in your garage?
He wouldn't want it any other way.
Well, Tom, hey, listen, thank you for the time and coming on the program. I love the idea. We always want to hear from listeners that have actually done what we talk about sometimes.
I know Tom from past, and I was very surprised that your email thing was...
Yeah.
And then when I heard his voice, I knew immediately who it was.
Well, Tom, listen to you. God bless you, and have a good weekend. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you. And Tony Joe, thanks for being such a big part of the history of this car.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to do that, and I'm glad you called in, and I look forward to talking with you. Thanks for coming on the program.
God bless you. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. There's so many things I want to say. It was so interesting about that, but we'll save it for next week.
Yeah, we can do it next week.
This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.